Okay, good morning. This is Holly Magnuson here for Ask the Security Guy with Shawn Kohrman. Good morning, Shawn.
Morning, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Feeling a little out of focus there. We finally pulled into focus. It's kind of weird there for a moment. Today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic that has been in our news a lot. The situation with the Riverside Court ordering Apple to help the FBI look at and get access to the iPhone belonging to one of the terrorists from the December San Bernardino shooting. So there's a lot to that, and we're going to probably jump right into that. If you have a question, you probably see in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, join the conversation. So if you have a question, you have a comment, you can click on that and you'll see another window open up and you'll be able to ask your question. And I will try to get those to Shawn as quickly as we can. So for now, Shawn, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Go from there.
So there's been a lot of coverage in the media about this whole thing, and not all of it's been accurate. There's been discussions about what Apple can and can't do, what the technological capabilities are, what the FBI is asking for, whether they're asking for a one-time, is this a precedent? And it's been tied up in the emotions surrounding the terrorist attack. So all of that combines to make almost a perfect storm kind of event. So what I wanted to do is take a little time today and kind of unpack this for our listeners and to put some context around it, primarily from a technological standpoint and from a security viewpoint as well. So, one of the big questions is, what is the FBI asking for? Really? So the FBI is asking for a customized version of iOS to be pushed to this device that basically removes all of the front end security controls that Apple's developed to protect us, the consumer. Now, nature of the case aside, that's what they're asking for. So what that involves is three major changes. One, they want to remove the 10 mistake lockout. So on Apple devices, if you have a PIN code enabled on your screen, it will, you can turn this off, but generally speaking, it will allow you 10 tries. If you fail 10 tries, it will wipe out the encryption key that is used to protect all of your data on the device. Now, your data on the device is encrypted using a very heavy protocol called AES 256. Very good encryption, solid math behind it, pretty hard to break. Theoretically, if you have a supercomputer or a hobbled together supercomputer, you could crack it over time. That's not really a debate because the key strength is what matters. Now, in this particular version of iOS, key strength is going to be a sum total of a 4-digit passcode, of which there are 10,000 possible combinations. So we're not talking a huge number in terms of brute force attacks of attempts that it would take to do this. But when your limit is 10, that's a problem. So the next thing the FBI is asking for is to remove additional software-induced per attempt delays. So now what that means is there are two components to how the attempt delay works. Apple has a 80-second or 80 millisecond delay built in per attempt. Now that's in the hardware. That can't be changed. Additionally, what they've done with software is overlay an incrementing delay, meaning that from attempt 1 to attempt 2, there's an 80 millisecond delay. From attempt 2 to attempt 3, it increases and it incrementally increases as you get up towards 10. So the more tries you do, the longer it takes between tries. And that is, again, a way of stopping brute force attacks where we just try again and again and again different permutations of things until we randomly land on the right one. So the last thing that the FBI is asking for is for a direct computer interface to be able to attempt these passcodes. Like I said, there's 10,000 that they have to go with. They want to hook it up to a computer and have a computer just breeze through those. And with modern computing, it wouldn't take that long. Now, the alternative they have right now is to do it on the screen, which means they're paying somebody to sit there and type 0012, 00123, 00124 until they land on the right one. The problem there is they have 10 tries. Now, there's been some speculation in the media that Apple has not been helpful in this case. Again, not the case, because Apple has historically always complied with legal requests, and in this case as well, they immediately upon getting the proper legal documentation, they provided the FBI with all the account information, the iCloud backups that they had, and the keys to decrypt the backups. Because the way iCloud works currently is your phone is encrypted with your key, but in iCloud, Apple maintains the encryption keys. Now, I just saw an article this morning that said Apple is very actively working on a form of encryption for iCloud backups that would tie the encryption keys to your phone, meaning they wouldn't have access to decrypt your iCloud backups either, which they currently do. So that leads us more along towards the model where the password managers that we recommend already employ. They don't have access to our data. We set the key. They don't have the key. So Apple is looking at changing their infrastructure to mimic that approach. So that's an interesting sidebar. Now, as to whether Apple can technically create an iOS version specifically for this phone, the answer there is yes, they can. Every iOS version out there is tied uniquely to a device, and that is handled by certificates, and I won't get too far into the encryption and how that works, but every iOS version and update out there is customized to the device it's going to. So there is already a secure mechanism for doing this. But one of the legs that Apple is standing on legally is that it would be an undue burden for them to develop a whole new iOS specifically for this purpose. And they view it as a precedent because even though the FBI is going forward and saying, well, we only want it for this one device, courts across the country, especially in Manhattan, are already saying very publicly, oh yeah, we're waiting for the outcome of this case, and we've got hundreds of phones we want Apple to unlock for us. So right there, the idea that this would just be a one-time event is just false.
And I think that's where, as a society, we're getting very scared. What does this mean in the long term of what is private and what's not?
So I want to be very thoughtful about this and tell our listeners this is a precedent-setting case. The courts are using what's called the All Writs Act, which was formed, I think, in 1786 or 1789, basically, which is to fill in the gaps between existing laws. And they're trying to apply that. Now, we have an existing act on the books called the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. And that specifies that, let me pull up the text here. A company has an obligation to assist the government with decryption of communications and made it clear that a company has no obligation to do so where, as here, the company does not retain a copy of the decryption key. So that is what Apple is leaning back on as part of their defense and saying, we don't have an obligation to fulfill the requirement this way. Now, what's interesting is all of this could have been prevented. This entire scenario could have been prevented. What happened was early on in the process, someone either in the at you know this at the either in San Bernardino or with the FBI reset the account for the password on the iCloud account associated with his phone. But because they couldn't get into the phone, they couldn't update the password there. So there's a 6-week gap in the backup data from the time of the last backup they have in iCloud to the time of the event. There's a 6-week gap where no backups were taken. And what the FBI is after is whatever's in that 6-week window. And their questions are valid. They're trying to prevent another terrorist attack and trying to figure out who else was involved and trying to work on that. Nobody's arguing their intent there. We fully understand what they're trying to accomplish. What's really a question with this whole thing is the how. And the how is unprecedented. What they're asking for has no legal precedent to date. So it's a very interesting issue. Apple is concerned because if they go along and they comply with this request, the U.S. is just one country they do business in. They're an international company. What happens when China says, "Well, we want one too"? Or name a country. It evolves to the point where Apple, as a business, starts investing an inordinate amount of their time just fulfilling these law enforcement requests for customized versions of software. Now what's funny is we're approaching this from a court side where there's an argument to be made that this should be handled within Congress, within the legislative branch. There should be laws created around this type of thing. Unfortunately, this falls within a number of gaps. So, again, that's a reason why it's a very much a precedent-setting thing. There's an argument to be made that it's a very slippery slope. I would tend to agree it is. Where does this stop? If we start down this path, where does it end? I mean, the DA in New York said, "I have 175 phones just waiting for the outcome of this court case." I'm sure he's one of many DAs with similar situations.
Yeah, it's really very disturbing for me, and I told you I was going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, but it's really even hard for me to play devil's advocate when I say is the greater good here outweigh me that I'm not doing anything illegal. If they look at my phone, what's the big deal? But I can't even bring myself to play the devil's advocate on that.
So I have heard the argument where people say to me a lot, "Well, I have nothing to hide," and that's fine and good to have that opinion. And if you're at a point in your life where you can honestly say that, my congratulations to you. That aside, data is data, and without context, data can be used to tell a variety of stories. So while the context of your data, somebody else can look at that same data through an entirely different set of lenses and use it to tell an entirely different story depending on their intent, not yours. Now, that's not to say that a law enforcement agency or a government would do that. I'm saying it's possible. And when things are possible, sooner or later they happen. Now, Apple does make a very good point that as soon as they create something like this, it's only a matter of time before it becomes known and exploited and out in the wind. And they're right. History has shown that whenever a backdoor is created, it's used by more than the people it was intended for. And if we have the opportunity to learn from history here. And if we don't,
will we learn? I mean, that's the part that's kind of scary is will we learn from history?
it's a sad thing. Law enforcement, the law enforcement community has a very, I mean, they have a grave concern about what they call the darkening of the net, which means in their context that criminals are using cryptography, the same cryptography that's used to keep our communications private and our data safe from prying eyes and from, oddly enough, criminals. Well, criminals are using those same tools to protect themselves from law enforcement. And as encryption protocols get better and better, and the barriers to entry to decrypt this kind of thing become higher, is it feasible or is it possible to break the encryption? Yes. But the FBI doesn't have the resources or the tools, is what they're saying. So there's a number of layers involved here. I was listening to one security researcher saying, well, the math behind current encryption algorithms is perfect. I hesitate to say that. I have yet to see anything perfect in terms of technology, but it's pretty darn good. And it would require a significant amount of resources to break that kind of encryption.
As a reminder, if you've got a question or a comment, you should see in the lower left-hand corner a link that says join the conversation, and that will take you to the question and answer tool, and you can ask that question. We can give that over to Shawn. In the meantime, I guess I would ask, what does this mean for us today? I mean, what do we need to do? What can we do in this
Well,
situation?
there's not a lot we can do at this point. We're waiting for the outcome of this case to see where things fall. In New York, there was already a case where they tried to basically expand on this early and use the same justification that the FBI is making to unlock a phone in a drug-related case. The judge there turned it down, saying that the all writs clause did not bear proper authority in that context. So it's anybody's guess as to where this falls out. I always recommend, good security practices, encrypt your stuff. Have a passcode lock on your phone. Don't ever leave it just open. I mean, and that's true for a variety of purposes. When you think about the amount of data that's on your phone, having that in the wrong hands for identity theft, for credit card theft, for password resets, for just snooping into your life. I mean, all of those things are in this little device we carry around in our pocket now. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that thing is locked up as good as you can, as well as you can. But the same principles that we apply to our desktop computer or our laptop are the ones we should apply to these mobile devices. Encrypt them, encrypt anything attached to them. Encryption is a tool that helps us protect ourselves. At a broader level, one of the things the San Bernardino tragedy really brought into focus was the question that law enforcement has been saying in their updated active shooter trainings lately. One of the aspects of it is fight. Now, and that didn't used to be. It used to be run and hide. Well, now one of the a third component is fight. So from a security context, what I would say is, what are the things that you do individually to protect yourself, to ensure your own security? What things do not involve relying on others to protect you and your data? Encryption is a tool that's readily available on Android, on iPhone, on whatever device you have that can be used to help protect you and your data and those associated with you for that matter. But those are things that we do as individuals to help protect ourselves. I worry that we become so reliant on other things or other people to protect us that we lose sight of what are those key things that we do to protect ourselves. So in terms of what we can do, it's anything you can do on a one-on-one level, on an individual level.
Yeah, like I say, it'll be interesting to see. I saw earlier this morning that it sounds like Apple's president's going to make an announcement regarding some of this, but I don't have any details yet or when that's going to happen.
Well, Apple actually filed a response a couple days ago, and I'll actually read a couple excerpts of it here. There are two important and legitimate interests in this case: the needs of law enforcement and the privacy and personal safety interests of the public. In furtherance of its law enforcement interests, the government had the opportunity to seek amendments to existing law to ask Congress to adopt the position it urges here. But rather than pursue new legislation, the government backed away from Congress and turned to the courts, a forum ill suited to address the myriad of competing interests, potential ramifications, and unintended consequences presented by the government's unprecedented demand. And more importantly, by invoking terrorism and moving ex parte behind closed courtroom doors, the government sought to cut off debate and circumvent thoughtful analysis. Now, this is from the most recent response that Apple filed with the court, and I'll post the link to this PDF um, in the show notes.
Mhm.
So, because the document itself is 65 pages long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Please don't. Thank you. But yeah, I like what you did read there, and that Apple is trying to balance the two critical pieces here.
They are, and and remember, an organization they're a company. They're not they're not in this to serve the government. They're in this to make money.
Which they do make a lot of, but we won't go
They
there.
do, but they produce a product.
Mhm.
And the way they design their product is with what they perceive the interests of the greater good, which is personal privacy and security. Now, that can be interpreted and debated a variety of ways. I'm not going to get into that because that's really a political conversation. Um, but this case has very deep roots. It's very complicated, and um, there's nothing simple about this one.
No, there's not, and I appreciate your willingness to share your thoughts about this because you know it's a game changer for our world.
It has the potential to be that, yes. It does have the potential to be that. Now, there's always the possibility that the courts could punt and defer or pull back from what their original ruling was. Um, the question then becomes is does this where does the authority to make this kind of a decision lie? Does it lie in the judicial system or the legislative? But as you'll notice, neither one of those are technical. So
And do either group have the understanding of the technical to really make a good decision?
yeah, you don't want me to comment on
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry,
that.
I should not have asked that one. Open mouth there. So,
But there's another excerpt from the brief. The government says just this once or just this phone, but the government knows these statements are not true. Indeed, the government has filed multiple other applications for similar orders, some of which are pending in other courts. And as news of this court's order broke last week, state and local officials publicly declared their intent to use the proposed operating system to open hundreds of other seized devices in cases having nothing to do with terrorism. So, just again, to reinforce the idea that it's just this device or just this phone, technologically, that's possible. From a human intent standpoint, it is not. And that again is why I'm saying this court case is a precedent. How this thing falls out. So, do we have any questions or?
no questions. And we're pretty much out of time here. Any final thoughts that you would encourage us with?
Um, just as keep find a news source that you trust.
Do you have any you would recommend that you think are for the most part trustworthy?
There's two actually that I would say are unbiased and are reporting the facts as they are, and also interpreting the technical details in a non-geeky way. One of those is called Ars Technica, and I'll include a link to that. Um, Ars reports on a variety of things. This is just one of them. But the coverage there is always in English or with a great definition, because some of this stuff is pretty technical. Another one is a security podcast I love called Security Now, and that's hosted on twit.tv. I'll post a link to that as well. Um, and the author there, Steve Gibson, does a fantastic job of explaining this stuff. And so both of those are resources I would recommend to the general audience, to follow this case and to have a clear understanding of the layers involved and what's technical versus what's political.
Yeah, because we don't have any of that this year. Sorry. So with that, appreciate everyone who watched. Wait a second. Oh, thank you. I just, great summary. Somebody loves Ars Tech and Leo's Security Now with Steve G. So
Yeah.
we've got some people who already know about those two resources. So that's
Yep,
very
they're
cool.
great resources.
So with that, you have questions, feel free. You can email Shawn or I or the iso@apu.edu email address, and one of us will get back to you with that. For now, that will do it until next month. So
All
thank you,
right.
Shawn.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye bye.